Hello, everyone. I'm the host, Aden Li. Today on the podcast, we'll be analyzing the famous 1845 Edgar Allan Poe poem, The Raven. When soldiers came back from the Great War, the supposed war to end all wars, they were meant to be the lucky ones. They were some of the lucky few for whom Flanders Field wasn't their eternal resting place. Many came back with minor injuries, but those could be treated pretty quickly. Now, what was more unsettling was the erratic behavior of so many returning soldiers, the feeling that what these soldiers had seen had scarred them not just mentally, but physically. Shell shock, many called it at the time. We now know this condition as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. For people with PTSD, all of whom seen unspeakable horrors, the gaping wound left by these horrors never really goes away. Rather, the person learns to live with it. Living with it comes with the episodes of self-hatred and near insanity, much like the conversations between Poe and the Raven about his lost Lenore. Using colorful language, manipulation of tone, allusions, and repetition, Poe weaves together a beautiful story about the extremely harsh topics of loss and trauma. With a little bit of background, let us now read the poem. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of some one gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Ah, distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow for my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore. For the rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently, my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wandering, fearing, doubting, dreaming, dreams no mortal has ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" This I whispered, and an echo murmured back to the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back in the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon I heard it tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then, what thereat is, and what this mystery explore. Let my heart be as still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Opened here, I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped the stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just upon my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore, "Thou thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly grim and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door. Bird or beast upon this paltry bust of his chamber door, with such a name, is nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness, broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whose unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore." But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled the cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then, upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining, with the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloated o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then, methought, the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim, whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. "Wretch," I cried, "thy God hath then lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite and nepenthe from the memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." "Prophet," said I, "thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm on Gilead? Tell me, I implore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." "Prophet," said I, "thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul, with sorrow laden, if, with the distant Aden, it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the God's angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, for whom the angels name Lenore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." "Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend," I shrieked, upstarting. "Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of thy of thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that's dreaming, and the lamp over him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul, from out that shadow that lies floating on the door, shall be lifted, nevermore.
M-dashes are a notable feature in many of Poe's works, like The Telltale Heart, The Black Cat, and obviously The Raven. He uses them to suggest a sudden change in thoughts or tone, and in the case of this poem, they help the reader see the fragmentation of the narrator's thoughts as his sanity wavers. Repetition is also utilized in this poem, and it's interesting how it's used in the beginning to calm the narrator, like with lines such as, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door." But later, the same technique is used as what causes the narrator so much distress, as the raven repeats the word nevermore. One line in particular that stood out to me was the second to last line in stanza 7. "Perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door." Pallas refers to Pallas Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom. This line could be interpreted as meaning that the raven is a giver or an object of wisdom, but I believe that this line alludes to the raven being a threat to the narrator's rationality, or overshadowing it in some way. If the raven is to be interpreted as representing grief, then this idea could be seen throughout the poem. Throughout the poem, the narrator's grief over Lenore seems to impede every thought they have, as even something as mundane as a velvet cushion takes their mind back to the loss of Lenore.
The Raven is less of a work of words and more a work of pictures. Powerful description lends itself to powerful prose, and a vivid image of the scene is described with the most exact of words. But where did these words come from? Where was the inspiration? How did Edgar Allan Poe, a simple orphan from Virginia, manage to craft one of the most popular poems in the world? The answer may lie within his own life. Edgar Allan Poe stated in his novel, The Philosophy of Composition, that the narrator of The Raven was intended to be a young scholar. We can see signs of this within the poem. The narrator is nearly falling asleep while reading a quaint and curious volume of lore, possibly studying it. Poe's studies in the University of Virginia were in the schools of ancient and modern languages. The Raven could have been set within his time studying them. But this is only one of the many ways the Raven ties into his own life. Another notable theme of the poem is that of faithfulness to his lost love, Lenore. The narrator initially has faith that he will soon be able to talk with Lenore through the Raven, and continues to ask questions despite knowing the answer will be the same: nevermore. Poe's life has long been marked by death. He notably lost his parents at a very young age. His father abandoned the family in 1810, a year after his birth. His mother died of tuberculosis the year after, in 1811. He was adopted by merchant John Allen and his wife Frances, who would die in 1829. Edgar's older brother Henry would die in 1831, and Virginia Clem, his wife and first cousin, would die in 1847, 2 years after the publication of this poem and 2 years before his death in 1849. The narrator's insistence that the Raven is from the underworld and carries a message of the great beyond represents mourning and the incredible tsunami of emotions of someone learning that a person they know will never walk the earth again. It's Poe, taking the words and the feelings behind the statement, "I just can't believe they're dead," and turning them into a moving show of the feeling of loss. The narrator's devotion to Lenore's spirit was based on Poe's own death-scarred life, who managed to distill his own grief to paint a vivid portrait of mourning in The Raven. Resource credits: Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven, poetryfoundation.org, Encyclopedia Britannica, article, Edgar Allan Poe biography, the Edgar Allan Poe Society of Baltimore, The Philosophy of Composition, the Raven Society at the University of Virginia, Poe as a student. Music pieces used were Refract by Diffie Bossman and Ophelia's Dream by Benjamin Tissot. Sourced from and licensed by bensound.com. This podcast has been created by Aden Li, Leslie Shim, and me, Shrisha Prakir. Thank you for listening.